Okay. So where do I start from now?
I think I think you should hear.
Huh?
Hear now.
Then you have to talk to them first.
Okay.
You have to talk to the audience first.
So,
Okay, confirm it will work then.
yeah, it's not working.
Confirm it won't work then I can talk to them.
So we are very sorry for the little itch caused by the internet service that we are using. Yeah, like I said, it seems we can't hear Prof earlier on, but I think it should be his mic is on now, and we can all hear him. Yeah, thanks so much.
It's all right. I have to go back. Okay. Good afternoon, distinguished audience. Yes, the topic of today's conversation is Muslim clerics and abolitionism in colonial Lagos, Mustapha Adamu and history of a vanishing past. By way of introduction, I will start by saying that by the 19th century, the slave trade in the minds of the major European powers had become inconsistent with other economic pursuits. For them, it was no longer beneficial to the system as a whole, since profitability had to include the cost of production from the procurement of slaves and the opportunity cost in moving them. Therefore, there was a push to end the Atlantic slave trade. Yes, this is just one of the reasons, given for the need to abolish the slave trade then. And of course, we had a humanitarian angle to it as well. And the dominant discourse has always been that the Europeans themselves externally motivated the abolition of trade in slaves, and without giving attention to the activities of the locals, the activities of Africans themselves, and in particular now the activities of the southwestern Nigerians in abolishing the Atlantic slave trade. However, that brings us to the aim of this conversation. This conversation looks at abolitionism from the prism of Islamic teachings, impact on Muslim clerics, and the historical narrative of a slave master and his manumitted slave in colonial Lagos. There exists substantial scholarly works on the abolition of the Atlantic slave trade in Yoruba land, but little attention has been paid to the personal efforts of local abolitionists, especially Muslim clerics in colonial Lagos. The Muslim clerics that we shall be discussing this afternoon, they actually derived their actions from the teachings of the Quran. And this brings us to looking at what the Quran says about how to undo slaves. I take you to the chapter 4 of the Quran, Surah Al-Nisa, chapter 4, Quran 4:36, and the Quran says, "And do good to the parents and other relations and orphans and the needy, and what your right hand possess," that is in brackets slaves, "for Allah loves not those who are proud and boastful." In this verse, Muslims are enjoined to be kind to slaves and do good to them. Abu Zar, a companion of the Holy Prophet, relates that the Prophet used to say that your slaves are your brethren. So if any one of you happens to have a slave, let him give him the same food that he himself eats and the same clothing that he himself wears. And do not give them such work as is beyond their power to perform. And if you ever happen to give them such work, you should help them in doing it. This will derive from the book of Hadith, Sahih Buhari, Kitab al-Itqul. These are the two sources of the Muslim injunctions, the Quran and the Hadith. These Muslim clerics actually derived inspirations from this, and of course, it manifested in the way they handled the slaves under their custody during the period of study. Between the last quarter of the 19th century and the second half of the 20th century, the city of Lagos had Muslim clerics who were strong adherents of Islamic injunctions. Some of them were Shiekh Sunmonu Animashaun, Idris Animashaun, Saka Tinubu, Jubril and Imam Muhammad Lawal Augusto. So you may want to ask, what about them? What is so significant about these Muslim clerics? A short profiles of these Muslim clerics would probably give an insight into their background. Shiekh Sunmonu Animashaun was a Muslim cleric of the 19th century Lagos who was buying slaves purposely to set them free. Besides, he adopted Idris Animashaun and integrated him into the Animashaun family of Lagos. Then Idris Animashaun, with few others, laid the foundation for the growth of Western education among Muslims of the Lagos colony. He was also the first headmaster of the first government Muslim school established in Lagos in June 1896. Saka Tinubu was one of the outstanding Muslim elites of the early 20th century, a founding father of Ahmadiyya movement in Islam. Imam Augusto, too, was another significant phenomenon in the history of Lagos. He was the first president of Islamic Society of Nigeria. Jubril Martin carved a niche for himself as the second Nigerian Muslim leader, a former president of the Ahmadiyya movement. Yes. Well, but out of all this, we are interested in Sunmonu Animashaun and Idris Animashaun, who are directly related to the personality of discussion today, and that is Mustapha Adamu Animashaun. So we are going to look at a kind of short biographies of Idris Animashaun, the slave owner of that period, and Mustapha Adamu Animashaun, the manumitted slave. Who is Idris Animashaun? Idris Animashaun was formerly known as Akinola Ode, and he was adopted by Sunmonu Animashaun, who integrated him into the Animashaun family of Lagos. The story of life and times of Idris cannot be examined in isolation from the kindness extended to him and bequeathed on him by Sunmonu Animashaun. This act of kindness was also extended by Idris to his slave Adamu Mustapha Animashaun, the focus of this conversation. Idris Animashaun was a model example of a devout Muslim but highly tolerant Muslim leader of the 19th and early 20th centuries Lagos. The story of his life in Lagos is traceable to Shiekh Sunmonu Animashaun, who during one of his business trips to Ife territory in 1862 adopted a boy, Akinola Ode, a nephew of one of his business friends, as his son. Despite the burden of trading tours, Sunmonu Animashaun did not deprive his adopted son education. Idris had the privilege of studying under the best Islamic scholars, and he was also exposed to Western education. Idris' penchant for education and his level of literacy were by no means small, as he was able to work as a clerk and interpreter in the Aborigines department of the Colonial government administration in Lagos. Similarly, Idris Animashaun founded the first government Muslim school in Lagos. The important virtue bequeathed on Idris Animashaun by Shiekh Sunmonu was the good treatment of slaves. Shiekh Sunmonu was an exemplary abolitionist who was reported to have been buying slaves purposely to set them free, in line with the Islamic injunction that encourages Muslims to be kind and generous to their slaves. Idris Animashaun demonstrated this act of kindness to Mustapha Adamu, who was later to be known as Adamu Animashaun, when he granted him freedom in 1912. Yes, this brings us to the third person in the Animashaun lineage. It's a generational thing now, from Sunmonu Animashaun, from Shiekh Sunmonu Animashaun, who adopted Idris Animashaun, and now to Mustapha Adamu Animashaun. So Mustapha Adamu Animashaun, hereafter simply referred to as Adamu Animashaun, was born a free man in Kano, Nigeria in the last quarter of 19th century to a certain Usman who married the daughter of the chief imam of Kano, Ibrahim. Adamu lost his freedom when he was captured in the Basasa War between 1893 and 1895 at the young age of 8. Adamu had a story of being sold from one master to the other, from Zaria to Katsina, from Katsina to Cairo in Egypt, and then later to Zaria, and from Zaria back to Sokoto, from Sokoto to Ilorin, and finally to Lagos. One of the greatest developments in Adamu's life was his being sold to Idris Animashaun in Lagos. Adamu had the privilege of attending a government Muslim school, which was headed by his master, Idris Animashaun, where he acquired remarkably ability to read, write, and speak the English language. And by 1902, he was employed by his master as an assistant shopkeeper. Adamu was committed to his master's business and rendered excellent service with utmost trust. By 1904, he was entrusted with the full management of his master's business with goods worth over £2,000. Adamu continued in his position as the manager of his master's business until 1912, when his master, Idris Animashaun, resigned as headmaster of Government Muslim School in 1912, with a view to devoting his time and energy to his private business. Idris integrated Adamu fully into the Animashaun family of Lagos, set him up in business, and granted him certificate of freedom in 1912. Adamu opened a shop in 1913 at Shita Street in Lagos, selling Islamic books and materials. In spite of his several background, Adamu got married to the daughters of the highly placed personalities in Lagos, such as the chief imam of Lagos, Chief Ashogbon, a white cap chief, and Afa Idris Animashaun. Thus, he became exposed to both the traditional and Muslim elite in Lagos. Yes. This brings us to looking at the Adamu impact as a publisher, editor, and politician in Lagos. As early as 1914, Adamu Animashaun established a Muslim printing office where he printed items such as large posters, notices, handbills, and circulars. From this printing office, Adamu Animashaun published what he called Nigerian Almanac. What about this almanac? In the almanac, he described himself as an astrologer who could tell the future of interested clients. Reportedly, his clients consulted him with a view that he would solve their personal problems after paying some fee. Indeed, Adamu Animashaun would seem to have drawn his clients from Muslims who believed that he possessed efficacious charms because of his knowledge of the Arabic language and predicting future events. While Adamu Animashaun was actively involved in publishing his Nigerian Almanac, he was also deeply involved in the politics of Lagos Central Mosque, where internal crises had divided the congregation into two groups. He became enmeshed in this crisis, using his publishing firm to support a faction. This is to show us that, this is somebody that was bought as a slave and brought into the Animashaun family of Lagos, and of course, he rose from that position of a slave to become a prominent person in the history of Lagos. The role played by Animashaun during the Muslim crisis clearly made him a central character in the religio-political development of Lagos. The adverse publicity that some Lagos newspapers gave the crisis must have influenced Adamu Animashaun to urge Lagos Muslims to invest in newspapers publishing. During this crisis, yes, the Nigerian pioneers and some other papers, they were at the center of reportage, publishing stories, and Adamu actually felt that there was that need for the Muslim community, the Muslim Ummah, to also have their own newspapers that will give their own perspective of the crisis. So he subsequently bought the Times of Nigeria for £360 from J.B. Davis in 1918. As the General Secretary of the Muslim Community of the Lagos Central Mosque, the ownership of the Times of Nigeria by Adamu Animashaun was also very useful to him and his supporters because it afforded them the opportunity to give reply to their critics who used other newspapers, especially the Nigerian Pioneer, to publish negative reports and articles about them. Evidently, because of the success of the paper in the first 2 years of managing and editing it, Adamu Animashaun requested the executive committee of the Muslim community to take over the responsibility of the Times of Nigeria while he will still retain his editorial position. Yes, apart from his editorial activities, Adamu Animashaun also ventured into politics. Politics was another important preoccupation of Adamu Animashaun in his old age. His involvement in politics later in life was in connection with his vision that Muslims must be active in the affairs of Lagos. Thus, when the United Muslim Party was formed in 1953, with the sole aim of improving the position of Muslims in the society, he was made the patron of the party. Adamu Animashaun wrote many letters and petitions to the colonial administration with regard to the education, employment, and provision of facilities for Muslims in Lagos and its environs. Although he never contested any election, he was reported to have addressed many of the rallies organized by the party in its efforts to capture seats in the elections into the Lagos City Council. Adamu Animashaun remained the patron of the party until 1966, when it was banned with all other political parties in the country by the military. In conclusion, this conversation or the paper has examined the roles of Muslim cleric in the transformation of a liberated slave from lowly position to a prominent personality in colonial Lagos. From a position of civility, Adamu Animashaun rose to be a leader of importance in the Lagos Muslim community through determination, dedication, and a clear perception of the kind of Muslim community he would like to see emerge. The paper indeed argues that abolition of trade in slaves was not synonymous with Europeans alone, but also with Africans, especially Muslim clerics whose abolition efforts have been under-celebrated. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Voice when
So thank you, Dr. Murtala, for that insightful presentation. It's more or less like having a story of how Omeru, from a different background entirely, even a geographical background, now becoming more or less like Oba in our own homeland, which is Lagos. And Lagos of then, for that matter, is serious, like he has explained, it's a very, you can call it the center of commerce like it is now. So it's such an interesting story about the how you can live from the grassroots and feast among kings and queens of this time. Now I would like to like collate questions from our audience. Who, like, you can drop your questions on the comment sections in our you can drop your questions in the comment sections on the YouTube page if you are joining on the YouTube, or on our Twitter accounts. We are going to collate the questions. But before then, I would like to ask this question. Like, the Islamic education is something very a systematic education that has really helped a lot, and I'm very sure it must have helped Adamu in the transition from being a slave into a prominent person. So, how can you explain this transition in this regard?
Okay, thank you very much for your question. Well, the first thing is that his master, Idris Animashaun himself, was an educated person, and Adamu had the privilege of being brought into the Animashaun family by Idris, and Idris from the beginning made sure that Adamu was enrolled in both the Islamic and the Western education system. And so through that, Adamu was able to get the normal education any child will get at that period, both Islamic and Western, which of course helped him to see things differently, and which imbued him with that zeal and determination as well to also promote the education of an average Muslim child in Lagos.
Okay. Thanks so much. So thanks so much for that explanation. So I'm looking forward to our questions. I would also like to ask again about, well, I'm not, maybe I didn't follow up with the Adamu Mustapha adopted his name as Animashaun family. Is like, can someone who was an house, that matter, adopts a Yoruba name and became popular with it? Because we had an issue about how Tinubu also possibly adopted Tinubu also. So it's something. Is it something cultural to Yoruba in the case of adopting name, or is general?
Well, let me say that Adamu's case was circumstantial. Don't forget that Adamu had to pass through different environments in the course of being sold from one place to another. In fact, according to historical records, the name Adamu he got while he was in Ilorin, because he was also sold into Ilorin. But of course, his adoption is not new. Even before then, we have had cases of adoption in Yoruba land. There could be a case of adoption depending on the circumstances. It could be because probably a child. So, I mean, I do not see anything so special. But the special thing about Adamu is because he was bought as a slave, and who was supposed to be for to perform economic functions, but he was eventually integrated into a family, and he was given the opportunity to educate himself, and he also had the opportunity of moving upward, in the society, especially if you look at him, his story very well. He had the opportunity of marrying into prominent families. He married the daughter of the chief imam of Lagos. He married the daughter of a white cap chief. What you can call the elite class, and that in itself actually put him in the elite class of Lagos, and coupled with the fact that he had the opportunity of being educated both in the Islamic and Western types of education. I think that is the unique thing about him and about his case, and the unique thing about him and his master. As someone, as a slave that was manipulated by his master. I think that's what I can say. Answering your question.
Thanks so much, sir, for the explanation. And I think it's also a more, it shed more light to the issue of Lagos in terms of settlers and the aborigines. How, of course, currently we've had issues about Liwa or Gedegbe, Likuwa, and some other issues of homeland that we've had or we always have in Lagos over time. And he knows a particular ethnic nationalities who are also prominent in Lagos. So does that mean Lagos has that kind of nature of accommodating whoever, and in as much improve yourself? Does it mean that once you get to Lagos, you can become what you want to become? And can we see someone like Adamu who will come from a different geographical location, becoming even a significant person in Lagos in the future? Is there like that?
Well, the thing is, Lagos. Well, Lagos today is a mega city, but like every mega city, Lagos is also a land of opportunity, and it has always been like that, even before the colonial intervention, before the advent of the British. And then don't forget that, by the time the British came, there was this special attention that was given to Lagos, especially in the first 2 decades of the 28th century, such that by the 1920s or thereabout, Lagos began to have, what we could refer to as infrastructures of trade and commerce, of course, which apparently attracted, migrants from the interland to Lagos. So Lagos has always been a land of opportunities, and I would say that yes, yeah, anybody can come into Lagos, and then we still get integrated because the people of Lagos are hospitable. That has always been the case for a very long time, and then is a place you can call a land of opportunity, and that's in itself actually helped the personality we are discussing. That was the period when ethnicity was not that known as such. And so, I mean, the issue of identity crisis or identity stigmatization or something like that was not really there at that period. So that in itself made it possible for him to be integrated into the family he found himself in Lagos. And, because he had no limitations to upward mobility, he was able to avail himself to the opportunities around him, and he became a prominent person. So, I mean, that's what I can say for now concerning your question.
Yes, I have a question from Victor Laoye.
Okay.
What are the contributions of Lagos Muslims to the growth and development of colonial Lagos, especially during the Victorian Lagos era? Their attitude to Western education.
The attitude of the Muslims to Western education. Yeah, but of course, I mentioned it that you see, they actually demanded for a Muslim school of their own, and that itself was a kind of a direct response to the missionary activities, the Christian missionary activities at that period. They felt that their own children too needed to have access to Western education in order to be able to enjoy what their Christian counterparts were enjoying. And if you ask me, that in itself is that was a major contribution on their part, because that enabled the Muslim children to have access to Western education, and then through that, there was a kind of advancement, in the Muslim Ummah status, education wise. So, I mean, that in itself is remarkable, if you ask me. And of course, we have a lot of them. I mean, that in itself produced prominent Muslims. And when you talk about this education thing, yes, some they got some from the government, and some the Muslim Ummah themselves contributed. The different Muslim associations contributed, and they also founded schools. And some of the schools are even surviving till today. So, I mean, if you ask me, I would say that yes, they did contribute to the development of Lagos in terms of education. Not only in terms of education, don't also forget that through through the Western education thing and the Islamic education, they produced eminent personalities who, of course, contributed to the growth and development of Lagos in virtually all fields of human endeavors. They produced engineers, they produced prominent lawyers, they produced judges, they produced university professors, and whatever you can call it.
Thanks so much for that. I think I should also ask a question here now. What you've explained about who developed Lagos. Is it the Aborigine or the settlers?
That question is very funny. If you say, you can't just say who developed Lagos, people, of course, issue. You don't need to, take it along the line of saying, how do you quantify, how do you lay claim to say that, the aborigines or the settlers or the foreigners or whatever? No, it's a collective effort. You don't have to begin to look at it from that angle to say that probably the indigenous developed Lagos or the migrants or the foreigners or the colonial governments themselves. You can't take people out of it regardless of their background. Don't also forget that, like I said, by the 1920s about when they began to build infrastructure of trade and what have you, all those migrants who came from the interland, they actually came to Lagos to look for greener pastures. Yeah, that's what we can call it, to look for opportunities. So in the course of their carrying out their activities, their trade or whatever, yes, they are also contributing to Lagos. But of course, the indigenes themselves who accommodated them, they are also they all contributed, in pari passu. They contributed together. So there's I have not seen any statistics, any records to show that, Lagos was solely developed by by foreigners or by migrants or the indigenous themselves. Don't forget that Lagos has been a metropolitan district for since the period of the colonial period. Where do you want to put the activities of the liberated slaves? The liberated slaves that came into Lagos, and they played very pivotal roles as far as the development of Lagos is concerned. So Lagos, the development of Lagos cannot be linked to a particular group at all. It can't be linked to a particular group. It's a collective effort. And don't forget, all those who moved to Lagos, whether back in the colonial period, and even up to now, it's a symbiotic thing. You talk of reciprocity. They came to Lagos to do something. Definitely, you must contribute something. So that's the response I can give for now.
Well, I'm still hoping that we could get more questions. At least with these engagements, we've known Lagos to become a body. Whoever has the potentials to thrive and be how the likes of Adamu, more people are still trooping to Lagos for greener pasture, and they are making it in millions. So I would like to say thanks so much for coming to Dawn Commission to use this platform to educate us about the transitions of people from one level, low level, to a greater level within the Yoruba homeland, and how accommodating and how rich the Yoruba homeland, especially Lagos, has been a position of opportunities for people to thrive. So we really appreciate your comments, sir. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much for giving me your platform to present my research output to this distinguished audience. Thank you very much.